I really do just praise wrestling for taking me out the hood and just providing a better life for me and my family, you know?
We can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestled, because if you wrestled, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
You know, if I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if it gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Wrestling Changed My Life podcast presented by Spartan Combat. This is your host, Ryan Warner. It's Wednesday, November 30th. This episode's presented by Beat the Street Chicago. They're our favorite nonprofit in wrestling. Beat the Street Chicago is the largest youth wrestling organization in Illinois. They have a standalone facility. They're impacting hundreds and thousands of kids each year. And Beat the Street Chicago this past summer held a Beat the Streets National Duels, where Beat the Streets organizations from across the country came to Chicago to compete in a dual team tournament. And the experience for the kids was amazing. Beat the Street Chicago just released a documentary which chronicles the Beat the Streets duels. Go to btschicago.org to watch the film. This episode is with Darrion Caldwell, national champ for North Carolina State. He had an epic NCAA finals with the great Brent Metcalf. That's unforgettable. It was great having Darrion on the podcast. Fan of the week goes to our friend Jeremiah Breen, the proud new owner of a Wrestling Changed My Life coffee mug. Jeremiah is representing Santan Valley, Arizona. Thank you for supporting the podcast. And if you want to support the podcast, go to store.wrestlingchangemylife.com. We have t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mug stickers. And before we get to this episode with Darrion Caldwell, a final shout out to our sponsor, Athletic Greens. Athletic Greens has been a sponsor of this podcast for almost a year. Go to athleticgreens.com/WCML to take advantage of a special offer. 5 free travel packs and a 1-year supply of vitamin D. That's 5 free travel packs and a 1-year supply of vitamin D. Athletic Greens is the company behind AG1, which is your nutritional cheat code, and it's a perfect fit for all those wrestling parents that are looking to keep their kids chock full of greens this winter. It's also great for a post-weigh-in meal. AG1. Put 1 scoop of AG1 into a glass of water, mix it up, slam it down, and you have your daily allotment of vitamins, minerals, and superfoods. athleticgreens.com/WCML to get 5 free travel packs and a 1-year supply of vitamin D. That's it, folks. Let's give it up for the great Darrion Caldwell. Folks, a quick warning. The first 5 minutes of this interview, Darrion took from his car, and most of the interview takes place with Darrion at his home. The last 30 seconds, Darrion gives us a tour of his house. Just a quick reference. Enjoy the show, folks. Darrion Caldwell, welcome to the podcast, my man.
It's good to be here.
I just rewatched a bunch of your matches. Dude, the one I didn't know about, the Ryan Lane quarterfinal from 2007. That was crazy.
Yeah, that was a barn burner right there, man.
And for folks who don't know your story, tell us about Rahway, New Jersey, man. Tell us about the early days.
Yeah, man, I grew up in the rough neighborhoods of Rahway, New Jersey, man. I learned a lot there. Pretty much my base, became an athletic kid out there, just learning how to flip off fences and It started off on dirty mattresses across the street at the junkyard. We find dirty mattresses at the parks and stuff like that. Wherever we could find, we flipping off of them. And then that led to me jumping off fences, and then little buildings, like little buildings, like uh, just crazy stuff as a kid. Always fighting, but I grew up in a strong family. Like, had both of my parents. I had a bunch of siblings. Always fighting and stuff like that. So for me, wrestling was just kind of fit. My very first wrestling practice, I was good. I'd say. In um, my own books, I felt like I was, holding my own. And for me, it just wrestling kind of just clicked early. I hit the ground running when it comes to that first year. I didn't even know I was actually gonna be wrestling. I was training, just practicing and stuff, and I was in fourth grade. I had a buddy who we were actually in his backyard, and he was on a wrestling team. We played football together, and we got to tussling, and I kind of slammed him on his back. And his dad was like, "Man, we gotta get you out on the team. We gotta come out to wrestle." Long story short, I went out that whole year, pretty much watched him do tournaments, and I trained that whole year. And fifth grade year, I was like, "All right, let's do this." So my coaches started taking me around the tournaments, Rosa Parks and Cranfords, and places like that around Rahway, and so once we realized I was winning these tournaments early, beating pretty good guys, guys that were doing it for a while, we kind of just stuck with it, and so that's how wrestling became, a part of my life. It really just kept me away from all the BS that was happening around me. I really do just praise wrestling for, taking me out the hood and just providing a better life for me and my family. Now, obviously, I've had a bunch of great coaches who've had their hand on me growing up. Our high school coach, Fred Stuber, he just actually retired. After a long stint. He's a guy who took nothing to something. He didn't wrestle in high school. He didn't wrestle in college. He boxed, but he became a dedicated wrestling coach in Rahway, and he produced multiple state champions. That type of dedication you don't see every day from a coach. And so when you can get those type of coaches, you hold on to them.
So outside of your high school coach, tell me about how you met J-Rock, Johnny Johnson.
Well, we started off doing wrestling matches. He put together these crazy lineups of dudes. With myself and Jordan Oliver, Alex Mead, Jordan Burroughs, the Garrett brothers. He put Vince Jones, Demetrius Hester's. Like, he put together this crazy lineup of dudes and bring us all in and have us all together and working out. And it kind of just became a family, and so we go all around East Coast and just dog these teams out. And it kind of just created a brotherhood, What Johnny did for us and with us, I don't see that happening now. It's hard to find 3-4 national champions all under one room in a high school program, a high school club. You just don't see that anymore. But what Johnny was doing, and when I was around wrestling coming up, it wasn't matched, And we go into these tournaments, and everybody knew, like, man, we're all 2 for 1s here. It's about to be a show. It's not just going to be a blowout, but we also always give a show, So.
What was Burroughs like back in those days?
Burroughs was quiet. More, he was still the same guy, you know. But you could see Burroughs making a transition to his like stepping into his true form, you know, which was cool to see. He was one of those guys that he'd have some tough matches, but he'd always pull it out, you know, where it's like, man, you should have dogged that dude. Like it shouldn't have been close. Like what you were doing at the end of the match, you should have been doing in the beginning of the match, you know. So to see Burroughs, him just being able to dominate from first period to the third period nowadays is like, wow, he really just stepped into his true form, you know, because he had a lot of flashes of greatness in high school, you know, and a lot more flashes toward the end, you know, and so it's just a credit to hard work, you know, and dedication, staying down and doing what you do, you know.
And so when you guys were going to work out with Johnny Johnson, was this like a couple times a week you guys would go and it was like a club deal, or you meet up on Sundays? Like what was kind of the structure of it? How often would you guys meet?
Well, I'd go down there. For me, I'd go down there as many times as I can. Usually on the weekends. You know, if we can get some time off during the weekday, I go out there. It was just fun to be out there with Johnny. You know, driving around in his fast car. You know, Johnny's always been a team player. You know, so and a great role model for us. You know, so just to be around Johnny, we always want to be around, and so for me, it was once, maybe twice a week if I could. You know, but he was South Jersey, so I just get down there as much as I can. And Johnny really was vocal and reaching out and making sure I was there, you know, making sure I got there. And so that was huge. That was big, you know.
And tell me about like your memories of the Jersey State tournament and how you did through there.
Jersey State, I used to just run through them for real, you know. It's not much. There wasn't much to it. I lost 4 matches, all of them being my freshman year, you know. So, but I knew early on, I thought I could have been a 4-time state champ. I knew early on I was great, you know, at wrestling. And so, you know, not just athletic-wise, but I really put in the time and the hours that most people didn't, you know, despite, like, what anybody acts like they know, you know. I put countless amount of hours into the sport. And so training has always been my life, you know. I've trained way more hours than I've competed, you know. And so that was just normal, you know.
Yeah, what was your routine when you were really in the thick of it in high school? Were you doing like morning runs, 2-a-days, or what was it like for you?
Man, it was just regular. I wasn't doing anything crazy except going to, like I said, when my friends was going out on the weekends and, you know, hanging out after school and stuff, I had to be in the wrestling room every day, you know. And then once I left the wrestling room in Rahway, I had to go down to South Jersey, you know, or I had to do extra work. You know, it was just the extra credit, you know. I was always doing extra credit, you know, not just putting in the regular hours that the standard kid will be doing, you know. Most kids go home and after a practice and start playing video games, you know, but that wasn't the lifestyle that I lived. You know, I lived the wrestling lifestyle to where I had to go do other practices. I had to be watching film, you know, everything consisted around wrestling, you know, or I was cutting weight or doing something that mattered, you know. And so wrestling, coming up in Jersey, though, you know, it's just tough. It's rough, you know. But again, I always knew I was the best, you know. So I set the bar, you know, and I set the bar and everybody else follows, you know. I've been setting the bar. I mean, 146-4. I mean, it speaks for itself. I felt like I was just running through guys, you know. But dedication and hard work, you know. I really had to grind for it. It wasn't like I woke up in the middle of the night and just happened to be good. You know, I had to work and I had to sacrifice, stuff like that, you know.
And you were playing football too.
Oh yeah, football for me was kind of one of those things that helped my wrestling, you know, because I come back maybe a little bit more fast, you know, than most guys, a little bit more shifty than most guys, where guys were still putting their bodies into wrestling motions. I was putting my body in the football motions, making myself getting more explosive, getting more agile. All the things that football players possess in terms of athleticism, I was creating that on the field.
What position did you play?
Football, I was cornerback. Played quarterback. Like I said, I was dragging all my friends on the football team to come wrestle, and they showed our guy, Andre Neblett, my best friend. He wound up, again, getting drafted to the Carolina Panthers before he got traded to the Patriots, where he finished his career out there in New England. But, he started wrestling in 8th grade, and my dad and I, we would just stay on him. All the tournaments I went to, he went to, and then his freshman year, he never really wanted to wrestle, but he was competitive, and so he was always with me. So he loved to compete. And so he stuck with it and ended up taking 5th in the state his junior year and then 4th at state his senior year. And I do believe he could have went on and wrestled in college, but football was just calling, And so, but what I think wrestling did was really help his football game to the next level, because we had a lot more guys than just him. I'd say we had 2 other potential NFL players on our team, right? But what wrestling did for Dre was create a coordination that I don't think those other guys was necessarily getting, through wrestling, knowing how to use his hands. His stiff arm was retarded. He had the craziest stiff arm you'd see. And he ended up playing on a offensive or defensive line, So
where'd he go to college at?
He went to Temple University. So it was no wrestling. I guarantee, though, if it was wrestling at Temple, he could have probably been a double sport All-American type, But he had actually wound up wrestling Demetrius Hester at state, and close match, a good match, but he lost, he wrestled Zach Reyes. He's wrestled the who's at heavyweight in New Jersey and did well. So.
And you said your dad would take you guys to tournaments. Was your dad an athlete?
My dad swam, but he's just as much of a wrestler as I am. He's been there since I've been wrestling. So I feel like wrestling is one of those things where you don't have to be the most athletic. You don't have to be the strongest. You don't have to be the fastest. You just got to be the most dedicated, And when you're the most dedicated, you get results. I think my dad really grew into the sport, grew with the sport, and he learned a lot. So I feel like he's a wrestler and it's without actually having to put his body into motion,
My mom's the same way, dude. She didn't know anything about it, and then by the time we were done, she was like as much a wrestler as anyone I know, and she still loves it to this day as much as anyone I know.
They acquire the skills too just by watching,
And it's a big commitment for those folks.
Yeah, to be at a wrestling match all day, it's just a credit to them, because it's boring, it's hot. You got just boys just tackling each other all day, beating each other up all day. Like, you really got to be dedicated. You got to really be dedicated to wrestling to do that year in and year out, and it's just a credit to our parents for, sticking with us and being there when we need them,
And so being a 3-time Jersey State champ, what kind of attention were you getting from colleges coming out of high school?
I was getting all the attention. It was one of those things for me. It's like, pick 5 schools and we'll take visits there, and that's pretty much what I did out. But I want to go here. I want to go here. I want to go here. I want to see this. And I want to go here. And so I wound up taking 3 visits and was like, all right, I'm gonna go to NC State, But it's easy when you're when you a 3-time state champ to get noticed, at least in Jersey, 3-time state champ out in South Carolina is probably a little different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's no kick on South Carolina, right? But it just is what it is, you know.
No, for sure, for sure. Now, I heard you almost went to Nebraska and wrestled with Mark Manning. Talk about the relationship you and Coach Manning had.
Well, we just kind of built a bond, you know. It was just like me and Manning kind of just clicked, you know. It was something about Mark and I that we've just really clicked in. But for me, like, if I could have had Mark Manning, the school of my choice, I would have done that, you know. But I just didn't want to be in Nebraska. It just wasn't for me.
And Raleig's a nice place. The weather, campus is beautiful.
Yeah, they both real nice places, you know. It's just your choice, you know. I got to Raleigh, and I was like, man, this is where I want to be. Coach Tony Davis and Carter Jordan.
Dude, Tony Davis. I forgot he was a coach there. I just did a documentary on Tony Davis last year.
You know, that's what I'm saying. Like, if Mark, like, let me not, because I love Carter Jordan by far. You know, one of my favorite coaches of all time. You know, the head coach at NC State was Carter Jordan. But you know, Tony Davis has that history with Mark Manning, where Mark coached him to a national title, right? And so when I got, like, I feel like when I got to NC State, I'm like, all right, I got a little bit of Mark Manning here in Tony Davis. So, and I love the campus and the people around it, so I'm gonna just stick here. But you know, that was my thing, man. That was my guy. Mark Manning, you know, was my guy. And even after I graduated and I was battling some injuries, went to the Olympic Training Center, was still in a sling, you know, battling some injuries. Finally got out the sling like later on in the summer, my time at the Olympic Training Center. And then once my time was up, I just wasn't like able to do much for the team. I couldn't train or do much. So it just wasn't meant for me to be at the training center, you know.
Tell me about working with Tony Davis early on.
Oh yeah, but yeah, I got it. But before I talk about that, so I had got in contact with Mark Manning, or vice versa. Maybe Jordan talked to Mark for me, and I was out in Nebraska after I was done wrestling at NC State. So I lived in Mark Manning's house. He invited me to his home. He let me stay with him.
What?
After I was done after I had graduated, I was like banged up. I was already a broken wrestler. Nobody wanted to deal with me, right? I'm not winning. I don't have my winning ways. Mark Manning brought me to his home, let me live with his 2 kids, his wife, and just gave me opportunity. You know, he brought me on the staff, like not like officially on Nebraska staff, but he helped let me coach with the kids and train with the kids. And I was basically a part of the regional training center. And so that was a short-lived time, because shortly after I got a call from my management while I was in Mark Manning's basement. I got a call from Dave Martin. Actually, Lee Pritz was called me while I was at Manning's house, and he's like, "Yo, talking to this guy." Well, we had done a wrestling clinic for log wrestling out in South Dakota, Beardford, South Dakota. He's like, "Yeah, I'm with Terry Pack right now. I'm talking to this guy, Dave Martin, another South Dakota guy, right? And what do you think about MMA? He got guys like Bader and da-da-da, you know? So I'm in Manning's basement talking to Prince, like, man, listening to all the things that, you know, they were talking about and just what MMA was, you know, it's just crazy. So I wound up going from Mark Manning's basement, you know, he had a decked out basement that I stayed in, it was all sick. And to move back to New Jersey for like a week, and then boom, I went and started my MMA career in Arizona just through that little conversation with Lee Pritz and linking me up with Dave Martin through Terry Pack, and getting the ball rolling on my MMA career. But yeah, man, that was crazy. You know, Mark Manning let me live with him after I was done competing, and I was already an old, washed up wrestler. He still had faith, and he still had that love for me. You know, because I was drowning, bro. Like, you know, like when you don't when you're not winning wrestling matches, I mean, when you're not winning fights, it sucks. When you're not really winning wrestling matches, oh my gosh, you know. So it's like.
So is that why after you beat Metcalf, and we're going to dive into that match, but after you beat Metcalf, you still had 1 year remaining in college, right?
Yeah, I had that summer I dislocated my shoulder. I was not the same, and I was disrespecting myself, and it is what it is. I just didn't know how to wrestle with the injury, you know, like I couldn't. I didn't know that. Because what happened was when I dislocated it and I came back to 7 months, because I did that in 2009, like September 2009, dislocated it, and I won in 2009, you know. I had a good national team run. You know, I made the national team that summer, and I got back to school, and I dislocated my shoulder, tore my labrum, and then I had to get a surgery like a couple of days after, and then 7 months after that, I went to the Olympic Training Center, and I took took a shot on Angel Cejudo, and he sprawled in, and my shoulder popped, and then I was just like, man, just a simple, like, I don't know if this is like for me, like right now, you know. But long story short, after I had got a surgery, I dislocated it again. That was my redshirt year, so I took that whole year off to heal it in redshirt. And when I came back, I dislocated it again. And now I'm like, all right, my redshirt's year over. Now I'm back to a busted up shoulder again. So now I got to figure something out. And what happened was, it was like I was kind of debating either staying at NC State and just like trying to get my degree finished out, or go to the Olympic Training Center and just fully just focus on like getting another surgery, rehabbing it, and like trying to do this Olympic thing, you know. And I said, like most kids would, you know, I was like, I'm gonna stay in school, you know. I want to stay around my friends and stuff, and you know, even though I knew I wasn't 100%. I was like, I'm gonna just wrestle through this year. I'm not gonna get any surgeries. I want to be around my friends, try to get this degree, and that's what I did, you know. So I did that. While I'm going back to state, and yeah, that was that same that. So that after that redshirt year, and then that year that I came back after the redshirt year, I could bear, like, it was in and out all season. My shoulder was in out all season, and then finally, but I was able to win ACCs and get that done. You know, I really do. I really do just pat myself on the back, because I was battling so many injuries. I don't even know how I even won the ACCs, but I got it done. You know,
that's a gritty win.
Nah, for sure. But it didn't even feel good though. You know, like I'm like, damn, bro. I'm used to pinning every single guy in the ACC. Like, I don't care who it is. Like, you know, like I'm undefeated in the ACC, never lost the ACC conference match. You know, like it was like, if I always believe, like, if I can't go out there and do the ACC guys dirty, I'm just not gonna go out there nationally and do anything. You know, so I used to always just take pride in that, and I was able to get through that. Fourth ACC title was like 10-0 going into, because I wrestled maybe 6 matches before ACCs. Maybe like 7. Then I wrestled those 3 in the ACCs, and then wound up winning it. Got to the tournament. My first match was something crazy, like 21-6 to score, something crazy. It was a high scoring match, and I remember coming off like, damn, I don't think my shoulder's gonna be able to do this. Like, you know, next match I wrestled the little Grajales, and which I already been doing his brother up. Like, not saying that the younger one can't do better, but I've been doing your brother up, spladling them, doing all type of stuff, like pinning them, majors, like, both. Got a major on them in, this year, like, so, and then I went out and got injured against him, like, tore my labrum, and you go online, you see a picture of Pritz, like, trying to pull my shoulder back in. And it's just crazy because just yesterday was like my first day really back into wrestling.
No shit. Man, I forget that Lee Pritz and Noel Lobin were there at the same time when you were there. Like, I was like, damn, I've had Noel on the podcast. Love that dude.
Noel Lobin is everything, man. Just a straight up G, like just a big ball of love, no bull, like, very just a dictionary, But this life, man, that we get, just grateful for the people that we run across, because everybody's played a hand in the success, and so I really just want to pat them on the back as well,
Absolutely, man. All right, let's get to the goods here. You have one of the most epic 3-match series ever with Brent Metcalf, and I rewatched the matches this morning. Let's start with match 1. What did you know about Metcalf going into that first match where you spladled him?
Well, I already knew who he was, He won Fargo's, he was like this guy that was like Tom Brand's protege, going from Virginia Tech to, like, I already knew this kid, him and Slater, those were the two guys. Like, to me, like, man, I don't know, I don't even want to be in any divisions, but now, like, I'm stuck in, like, this is my body, like, so that's kind of where I was, like, you don't want to have to wrestle these guys, but it just so happened I ain't no bitch, so I'm like I like most guys don't want to wrestle these guys. Me, I'm all for it, right? But I already knew about Brent, right? And so I think like that week I had gotten into a car accident. I'm texting. This is when like the new slide phones, like they just started coming up with the slide phones, and you don't have to flip it no more. I'm over here like texting, eating Subway, driving with my knee. I'm like, like, and I just remember freaking waking up and me flooring the gas. I'm like pressing on the pedal, but I had hit a car, and so I wound up knocking myself out, totaling my car, and I got to wrestle Metcalf like a couple of days later. I remember my dad's like, "Oh, well, if you beat this guy, get you a new car," So that's what I did. I went out there and was just like, that was my first experience against. I wrestled national champs before, like Ryan. Ryan didn't win that, so he's runner up. But that was my freshman year too. But I wrestled high ranked guys, but nobody like Metcalf or Slater, And so, so I wound up. It was this small little dual meet. We had Iowa there, we had NC State there, then we had like 2 or 3 other smaller schools, which is kind of crazy. Like, it was like small schools. We were all in like a little gym in Ohio, a packed out gym. It was packed for it to be a little gym. It was packed out. But it was 2 mats on there and we had like a little dual showdown, And I wrestled Metcalf. Yeah, I just went out there and dogged him, Did what I normally do. I took a low single, set him up. I knew he was gonna try to do his front headlock thing because he's really good in the front headlock, right? So after I took the shot, I went for a drag, which is typical. If there's any film on me out there, a lot of my spladles come from drags or a shot, like from a collar tie to a drag or a shot drag out, to where I go hip to hip from there. I'm dragging out, getting hip to hip with guys, stuffing their head and splayed on them. Now it was just normal. Like I've been doing that since sophomore year of high school, like fluidly, And so I wound up pinning him. He's pissed off, ran through the door, kicked the door. I'm like, oh fuck, this guy is really crazy. Even when he loses, he like that. All right, cool. So was that? Yeah, that was that. And then that same year, he wound up going on to win nationals in our weight class.
Crazy weight class. Lunacy deep. Yeah.
I think he was supposed to wrestle Bubba because Bubba was number 2. I was number 3 in the weight class. And Bubba pulled out of the All-Star match. This is the following year. So he wound up beating Bubba. Bubba beat me at nationals in the semifinals. He wound up beating Bubba. Then him and Bubba were supposed to wrestle in the All-Star match the following year. And Bubba pulled out, and they called me, and I'm like, of course I'm trying to wrestle in the All-Star match. I'm fresh off the couch, blunt in hand, everything. Like, I ain't really care. Right? I was just, no secret, But I'm fresh off the couch, called me from Metcalf, and I'm like, all right, cool. I go out there and underperform ridiculously, or he just overperformed. He just did what he was supposed to do. He went out there and wiped me. Like I think it was like something crazy, 18-3 or something. I don't even think I even scored that many points. That's how bad it was. But I remember shaking hands, having a slap contest. Next thing I look up, he getting his hand raised. I'm teched. Cool. I'm like, all right, cool. But my dad didn't like that, My dad was like, I don't care how you like how unfocused you were, you shouldn't lose like this, And so he was on, he was on me all year. He's like, you just beat him last year, like you got to stop, So I'm like, all right. So I got it together, I really focused out that 2008, 2009 season, and when nationals came around, I just had one goal, and obviously it was to be a national champ, but I wanted to show what I did, how I splayed with this guy wasn't a fluke. Like what he did was a fluke. I was fresh off the couch again. Like this, it wasn't like it was just a preseason me. And so
did that match shake your confidence at all? The All-Star meet?
I know myself, and I'm like, oh, if I could pin this guy, but that was the thing. Everybody except Heinrich Barnes, who I didn't wrestle. I don't know. You can go do the research. Maybe I could be wrong, but every single person from 1 through 7. I think Heinrich Barnes took 8, or he took 7. Or it was 1 through 8 and Heinrich Barnes. But I beat out all of them and I pinned them all. Lance Palmer. Who else was in that?
Chirella.
Chirella was
maybe not. Maybe that was the previous year.
Chirella was the year before. I did beat Chirella, but I didn't pin him. And in nationals, I didn't really give a fuck the second time. I should have. Chirella was a tough guy though.
You got Rochelle, Patiscal.
Yeah, pinned them both and beat them both. I pinned them both and beat them. So I got multiple wins on every single guy. You're talking about Jake Patiscal, Kyle Rochelle, talking Bryce Sedoris, right? Pinned them all. And these are Olympians and all that stuff, But this is before the injury, it was like literally a walk in the park with these guys. But those are stats that people really care about. Me, I'm like, it wasn't a question if I was better than Metcalf or these guys, because every time I wrestled them, I pinned them all and beat them all, So not only did I figure out a way to beat them through points, I figured out a way to stick them. So,
dude, let's walk us through the Metcalf match. Dude, one of the craziest, just action-packed matches I've seen.
Yeah, man. I knew I I knew I was gonna be a national champ by the time I left. It wasn't anything it wasn't nothing he could do to stop that. It was just destiny. I was feeling good. I was feeling explosive. I was feeling fast. And I was just, again, throughout the tournament, it was easy. I didn't have any dog fights. I didn't have any 1-0 matches, 2-0 matches. I was beating guys decisively. So I felt like I was ahead of everybody. Obviously, I knew Metcalf was going to be the one. Obviously, my first thought was, all right, I got to beat Bubba. This is the year I got to beat Bubba to beat, because he's not going to beat Metcalf in my head, So I got to beat Bubba, So Bubba wound up taking an injury earlier or something like that to Bloomsburg guy. And then I was just like, oh, man, this is about to be a walk in the park. So it was a walk in the park to get to the finals, That's just how, I hate to say it, but that's just how much better I was in the field, Like, they were all good. They were all good in their own rights, but they just couldn't fuck with me. I was just too gifted on that mat, I was too good on the mat.
And dude, what impressed me in the finals with Metcalf, you come out explosive, takedown, then you throw a headlock. Like you had no respect out there. You were just going crazy.
Definitely didn't respect him, but I felt disrespected. Anytime anybody step on the mat, you just gotta feel like, oh, this motherfucker think he could beat me. Okay, so that's just the mentality that I have, and that's what I brought out with me, and it showed.
What memories do you have of the match, or did you just kind of go blackout during it?
Definitely the scramble. That scramble, I remember, like, all right, he don't feel that scramble, like, even though it was like a slow scramble, that first scramble was a slow one. I felt like he didn't feel scrambly, so I was just like, man, anytime I was finished I'm wrestling last, I'm winning the positions, like, like he just, I don't know what he was doing early on preseason, but or what I was doing, but he just felt different during that national final,
He was so deep on one of there's two big scramble sequences, and then you kept hipping, come out on top. And I think that's when, at a certain point, it breaks the will to be in that deep, and multiple times have you scramble out, and not to mention the offense that you were throwing at him. It's like, that's a tough situation.
For sure. It's the actual match seems a lot longer than it was, It seemed like I was wrestling him for a decade. I was just like, man, when is this match going to end? But, I was in it the whole time,
Yeah, and was there like any bit of a rivalry, like a beef going into it for you, or was that more after the fact?
Well, it wasn't a rivalry until I beat him, and even though we didn't wrestle again after that, until I beat him at nationals, it wasn't like, but unfortunately that my injury cut me short, so it really never turned out to be a rivalry, because had I not got injured, I'd have been back the next following year. We would have been wrestling again, I think he was wrestling, dude, man, God knows what he's doing with people, like he really does, because he's like, DC, you need to slow down. We got to slow you down with this injury, because I really feel like I would just separate myself from everybody, being like one of the younger guys on that national team that year, that summer, I would just separate myself from the field, and so it just is what it is, but I really feel like that injury was a blessing in disguise, because had I not hit rock bottom in the sport, probably wouldn't have found a new love for another, so.
And now you're back into coaching. You said a little bit, right? Are you getting back into wrestling?
Yeah, actually, one of the vets at my gym here in Florida, he just started up a wrestling program, and so he invited me to his class yesterday, and that was the first time I've done coached a class since I think I was in. Well, I was coaching a lot of wrestling at a jiu-jitsu gym, but it's been since 2015, so really since I really honed in and started focusing on fighting is when I kind of shifted out of coaching or wrestling, and so it's good to get my hands back on these kids and just get my knowledge out,
Absolutely, man. Well, I definitely appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's been awesome to talk through your story and kind of get inside your mind how you thought about some of these things. The last question we always ask people is, how did wrestling change their life? What's been the biggest impact for you?
Wrestling has changed my life in many ways. Say one of the biggest impacts that it's made on me is just creating discipline at an earlier age. In areas where I normally wouldn't have had it. I feel like without wrestling, I wouldn't be here, And when I say here, I mean just look at the life wrestling's created for me. In all honesty, I'm from Jersey, I got beautiful French bulldogs right here, got the pool in my backyard, this is what wrestling's done for me, it created an opportunity, to be able to live a lifestyle that I want, so I'm not trying to brag, but what wrestling has done for me is a lot.
I love it, man. That's a great way to sign off. Darrion Caldwell, it's been fun. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Wrestling Changed My Life with Darrion Caldwell. You can follow Wrestling Changed My Life on Instagram at Wrestling Changed My Life, on Twitter at WCML Podcast. And our website, WrestlingChangedMyLife.com, has our online store as well as all past episodes. Last but not least, check us out on YouTube, where we post the full video component of each interview. Just search for Wrestling Changed My Life on YouTube. That's it. Thanks for tuning in to Wrestling Changed My Life. Peace! Peace! Peace!